It's now 3 on the dot, saying greetings to Trudy. Hey, Mark, good to see Mark in. I thought, Mark, you would have been hanging out with Mom with all of the Queen's Jubilee, but Mark has always reminded us that he's a proud Negmawa, so we really see where his heart lies. Okay, folks, it's 3:01 now. Without further ado, let me welcome everyone on. Great to have you on yet another month. Oh my God, this is the fourth one of these. Where has the time gone? So saying greetings to everyone. Also, I want to welcome my panelists today, my guests today, Alison King and Finola Jennings-Clark, both of whom are probably no strangers to folks because they have been pretty much in the public domain for some time now. As I have been doing these webinars and also interacting with folks as a consequence of the webinars, especially over the last maybe 6 weeks, 2 months max, I've had a lot of folks reaching out and just really sharing thoughts, insights, and in a lot of instances, really, really personal stuff that they haven't necessarily felt comfortable in coming out and voicing. But it has been such a marvelous insight into who we are and the possibilities of who we can become. What I have found has been the overarching thing that stands out is how little we know of each other, and also how off target our perceptions can be. And I am saying that from my standpoint, as well as from the standpoint of other persons who I have been having conversation with. I have also found it really, really enlightening going across the board and speaking to a broad cross section of St. Lucians, both from a socio-economic standpoint, as well as from I'm going to sort of say skin color / ethnicity standpoint. And I'm sort of loosely using skin color and ethnicity because quite often as Black persons, we can feel disenfranchised, that persons, and generally you just tend to look at things as black and white. So boy, the white person has all the advantages over us. They form their little cliques, they join the yacht club, and then everything is open up to them. But interestingly enough, speaking to some of those folks who we will consider the white people in our society, it's also interesting to discover, one, they are a smaller group, and as a consequence, there can be that sense of we need to stick together, we need to interact with each other because, gosh, we are so misunderstood. And also the other side of it, when some of those folks reach out to genuinely lend a helping hand because this is how they feel, then there can be the backlash of, Gassa, where them white people going? Them white people controlling everything and they want to come and tell us what to do. That sort of attitude. So it has really, really brought to mind the value and the significance of having conversation. So I am looking forward today to the conversations that we will have, and conversations right across the board, because also bringing to bear what you folks who are in the audience will share by the usual way of just posting in the Q&A, and then Natalie, my photo assistant, will share around. Will pass on to me what has been commented on, and I will read it out and we will take the discussion from there. I want to point out in particular, Dawn French, who has been very much in posting a lot of links and so on, apologize about not being able to make it this evening because she is launching her 758 peanut books. But she said to me, Kirk, make sure you have the record button hit. So I'm happy to note that record is hit at this point in time. Annette, Mark's mom, who, gosh, boy, she has been so instrumental in sharing thoughts, insights. She is not with us today because it's the Royal Jubilee, and Mark, she shared this picture of you building an outdoor kitchen for her. So we know that she's enjoying, at least I know, and I'm sharing that with folks, that she's enjoying the evening. And I mean, being a British subject, being British, we can understand. So I just thought that I would share those little tidbits, and I'm sharing it because what I've found is it's consistently the same persons who are coming in, joining in these sessions. And I'm finding that we've become almost like a nice little family, a nice little group in exchanging thoughts and ideas. So I just thought that I would share that with you. One final thing before I invite in panelists is over the last couple of days, I have been sharing some pictures, and just really, it has warmed my heart, the feedback that I have been getting from folks about the pictures. I won't make a promise, but I will try to continue to post some of these as they've been finding such great resonance. But I'm saying try to post because what most folks don't realize is that the picture that comes off the camera is never the picture that you see, at least when it comes to me. I am always going in and doing post-production, and that can take a bit of time and effort. But I also want to share, and I think I pointed it out before, that the feedback that I've gotten has been inspiring, and it's given me the thoughts for something I've had in mind to do with pictures, but I just want to let the thoughts crystallize a little bit more before really sharing some more. So I think with those, what I like to call the house notes, it would be a good time for us to get started. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite in Allison. And the whole idea is for her to just share some perspective from her point of view. What's it to be Lucian? What does it mean to her? Some of the challenges she sees, some of the great things that she sees, some of it from her perspective, and her perspective in different positions. One has been mayor of Gros-Islet, another has been a permanent secretary. And Alison is also a civil engineer. So she is very, and chair of the National Trust. So many different hats that she wears that are all so intrinsically Lucian. So I think that we're in for a really great evening, just in terms of getting some insights there. And then we're going to have Finola to follow up, who again is a powerhouse in her own rights and also along the lines of being Lucian. So with that said, Allison, all yours.
Thank you, Kirk, and hello, everyone. I just wanted to make the point, Kirk spoke about seeing things as black or white, and I want to say that I fit on the grayscale because the white people of our community do not consider me white, and the Black people do not consider me Black. So I'm definitely considered mixed race, which is another little group by itself, probably even smaller than the white group. But I think even that, as I growing up, I had to figure out how to deal with that, and to be comfortable with myself as a mixed person. And I think I'm there. It took a while to get there, but I think I'm there now, and I have learned to accept who I am, and to realize that I can add value as that person, So I think that as I have grown older, I have gained the courage of my convictions, and I have become a louder mouth, So whereas as a young person, I perhaps, stayed quiet, held my corner. As I get older, I see it more as my duty to speak out when I see things that I don't think are right. And that's in the interest of everybody as Saint Lucians, So yes, I really do identify as a Saint Lucian. I love everything Saint Lucian. I can't imagine living anywhere but Saint Lucia. One of the most important roles for me was as a mother raising 3 daughters. And for me, it was important to make sure that I raised good St. Lucians, good citizens, people who were proud to be St. Lucian and who represented well when they went out into the wider world, you know, and always wanted to come back because St. Lucia was home. And that's how I always felt as well. I never felt, I have lived almost all of my life in St. Lucia, except when I've been out to study, and St. Lucia has always been home. Challenges, you know, I think St. Lucia right now faces a lot of issues, you know, in terms of development. I think we really have to take stock and re-examine our development models and ensure that our development is sustainable, that it ensures human development. And, you know, we need to bring everybody along. We need to make sure that all St. Lucians can benefit from this development model, because we have so much to offer. I think when we think of the tourism model in particular, it's so important for St. Lucians to appreciate that identity, what it is that makes us St. Lucians, because this is what we are able to sell, an authentic St. Lucian product that is offered by St. Lucians. And that benefits both the tourist and the individual who's able to use that Saint Lucia that he or she is proud of. So I believe that we have we're on the cusp, I hope, of moving in. I think COVID has helped with that as well. You know, the whole thing of encouraging tourists to come and stay longer and become part of our with Airbnb and the growth of Airbnb and that model. I'm seeing a lot more people, you know, embracing Saint Lucian culture. Saint Lucians are offering the cabaret and the bars by the side of the road. You see far more tourists, you know, patronizing at these types of places, and it's all about Saint Lucians offering the authentic Saint Lucian product. So I think in terms of tourism and development, that's the way we should be going. So I've sort of rambled there, so I'll stop now.
Okay, Allison, thanks for that. If you refer to that as rambling, well, I think that rambling has never sounded as good. Again, you know, it's nothing like getting it from the horse's mouth. And coming back to the same point that I raised, how the perception, you know, I'm sure that folks, or I want to believe that folks who see you out there will just think of you as, yeah, another white person, one of them white people. But, you know, only when we walk a mile in a man's shoes do we feel the pinch, do we have some idea of the pinch. So it's wonderful to hear it from your perspective. And as we continue along this journey, I believe that it's going to be so insightful for us to hear and feel and experience other perspectives, and that will truly help us to be more tolerant, to be more compassionate, to be more considerate of each other. So with that said, let me invite Finola in to share some thoughts from your perspective, Finola, which is going to be a bit different from Allison's own. And interesting because persons like myself might just ordinarily have lumped you all into that section of them white people. So all yours, Finola.
Thanks, Kirk, and good afternoon to everyone. And in case people don't know, so Allison and I went to school together from convent in the same class, and then Kirk was in A-level with the two of us. So we all, you know, we know each other from times, and not to put our ages out there, but, you know, I was in convent 75 to 80. And I came here when I was two weeks shy of 6 years old. So my background is different in that my parents were not from here. My dad was English and my mum was Irish. And we came out when we were young, and we first went to Tapia, which at the time was very white. But I have to say, from the time I went to convent through to today, you know, it struck me when you said about that feeling of needing to stick together as a minority cook. I've never experienced that in Saint Lucia. I never experienced it in school. And I think that was one of the things that made me feel so Saint Lucian, you know. And I know my older sister Liz had a slightly different experience. She was 2 years ahead of me in school, and she had a little bit. But when I went back to the UK as a young adult when I was 20 years old, and I settled there to study, I ended up working so that I could take advantage of my English heritage and study without having to pay foreign fees. That's where I discovered the true depth of the otherness between Black people and white people. And it was a shock for me then to understand racism. And, you know, you mentioned the yacht club. We grew up going to the yacht club. And at that point in time, you know, a mix of people came there. Yeah, it was a lot of white mixed race people and, you know, ordinary Black Saint Lucians, you know, who went there. But it still was an elitist kind of place, but it never had the sort of extremism that you experience even in some other Caribbean countries. And, you know, I remember our home growing up at the time, you know, I'm still in my family home here. At the time we built it, it was the northernmost lived-in house in the island. And so you knew anytime you heard a car coming up the road, it was coming by us. And it was a mix of all sorts of people from all political spectrums, you know, and all walks of life. And they were always welcome. So I look back on that very fondly. And, you know, I give credit to my parents that they were that open, even though my mom used to always joke and say she married my dad to get her own back on the English for the Irish, you know. But we grew up with it being kind of de facto that these are our friends, and that was that. And if anything, I have to say, I more grew up with a little bit of skepticism, more so about the white community in Saint Lucia. So I know that's a little different, huh? But again, I think it was just, you know, from my parents' perspective and that. And I'll say also, that said, if it's not that we didn't benefit from that sort of white/expat community cohesiveness. I can look back now and I know from reading, you know, letters that my dad kept. In those days, you know, when we built the house, it basically broke the family completely. And if it was today, we would have lost that house. And the only reason we kept it was because my father had, you know, good relationships with the other expats who owned the banks, you know. So there was that. I was unaware of it personally, but it wasn't to say that it didn't exist. And you know, I mean, you know, I identify as a Saint Lucian. I am a mixed culture Saint Lucian, I would say, because I did live in the UK, and, you know, I lived for a while in UK Europe, and I can't say that doesn't affect, you know, how I view myself. It does. But when I come back to it, my you know, when I think about what bothers me the most, or what I'm more passionate about, it's always to do with Saint Lucia. And I think Saint Lucia has that effect on people in a lot of cases, which is why we end up with a lot more people settling here after they've visited Saint Lucia for a few times. And that's essentially what happened with my parents. You know, and now we have the next generation of our family, and that brings us to the same situation where we have a mixed race. She's my niece, you know, and for her finding her place as she went back to the UK, as somebody who was just Sarah's daughter, you know, in Saint Lucia, going into the atmosphere of race in the UK, and especially in some areas more so than others, it's been really educational watching her go through that and watching her find herself as to who she is as a young person now of Saint Lucian origins, going into the UK and finding her space. I think I rambled as much as Allison now, so we can swap for a bit.
So, okay, boy, I tell you, like I say, rambling has never been as good. Finola, thanks for those insights. Again, a different perspective, and I think that it is in being aware of these perspectives, sharing these perspectives, that value lies. Something just came to mind, Finola, and I just remembered when you shared your bio with me, reading through it, and I was quite surprised at not only your arts and craft training, formal training, and like you shared, I mean, you, Allison, and we go back to those days of A-level and just bring it all the way forward. So we've always known each other from then. And interestingly enough, I have just always thought of you as Allison and Finola, because that's who you are. And I think what really happens is by interacting with persons, you now come to recognize who they are, their identity, as opposed to this facade that is skin color. And I'm bringing it back to your arts and craft. And I remember reading through and seeing that you had worked with the Choiseul crafters and been quite instrumental in that. And what struck me was, oh my God, here you are on the northern tip of the island. There must have been a passion in you to cause you to take the effort, the energy, the cost, and so on involved to go all the way to Choiseul and work with them in a very, very hands-on way to help them develop their craft, to help them develop it into profitability as well as sustainability. And what I'd like is just to invite you to share some insights into that, some of the good that came out of it, some of the challenges, and some of where you see that we can take this to, in line with what Allison was speaking about tourism. And now we're seeing Airbnb, and we're seeing greater efforts to have greater economic impact of tourism hitting communities such as the crafters that you were so instrumental in working with.
Yeah.
So thoughts on that?
So first of all, yeah, I consider myself having been very lucky in that, well, I grew up creative, kind of a mix of backgrounds, and my mom was quite creative as well. So when I went to the UK, I ended up studying crafts, and in so doing, I decided, I'd like to talk about or explore Saint Lucian crafts. And I had good support from the Folk Research Center and NRDF at the time, enough at the time that I could go down to Choiseul and spend some time. And at that point, they were doing filming with the late Cathy Osman. And it was really great. I loved learning about things then, and but I look back at what I wrote then, and I would rewrite it all completely differently now. But it did set me into that mode of working in local crafts. And I actually came back to Saint Lucia immediately after studying, because I really, actually, when you say about finding my finding that grouping, I was desperate to get back to some Caribbean, some Caribbeanness. And And so I came back and I worked with the ministry at the time, the Ministry of Community Development. And I remember then my sister and I were the only white civil servants. But it was just more like something that we would laugh about. You never felt like you were out of place. And I would like to say that we were treated no better, you know, also because we were white. And I know that's another issue that we can talk about, this propensity we still have to assume that because somebody is white, they actually know something, you know, more than maybe, you know, a local would. Well, I'm saying a local, I'm a local, but you know what I mean, right? So so yeah, I was blessed in being able to have that entry into Choiseul, because when I came back, I worked, you know, 3 days a week down in Choiseul, and I absolutely loved it. And I grew friendships, and I still consider Choiseul kind of my second home, even though I'm not there as often. And it led me into a life of working in developing arts and crafts in Saint Lucia in many different guises. And I wish I could take the credit that you gave me in that intro to say that we, you know, we built a level of sustainability. The sad fact we're talking about, I came back to Saint Lucia in 1992. And in the time since then, we are still not much further ahead. If anything, in some ways, we're further behind. So when I was there, the Choiseul Craft Center was still a place that people would like to go and visit. You know, you go now and it belongs to NSDC, and I know that wonderfully they do have plans to redevelop it to become more what it was, but in a modern sense. But the crafters have diminished in numbers, in their hundreds. So you're left now with maybe, I would say 200, if you're lucky, people doing crafts in Choiseul. And when I would have first been there, you would have had more like 500 to 700 people doing crafts there. Some of the crafts we're losing the last remaining people who know how to do that craft in that way. And it still speaks volumes to how we do or don't value our culture in Saint Lucia. I would say that we speak a lot about it, but we don't value it to say that we're actually going to put long-term programs in place. There was recently a discussion with some of the kids that I actually taught in the brief time I taught at convent. And they were, you know, I got a very passionate message from one of them that we talk a lot. And I said to her, let me just send you the reports from like 20 and 30 years and 10 years ago, where we're saying the exact same thing that you're saying. So don't waste your time redoing them, use them and still fight the fight. But the reality is that up till a day like today, we don't have any long-term solid program or department or anything that supports culture as a truly substantial, let's say, ministry department worthy part of our lives. We have the CDF, the Cultural Development Foundation. We have Folk Research Center. Those are both wonderful, you know, in their own way, and you know, facing severe challenges in their own way all the time as well. But we don't have, you know, a Ministry of Tourism, a Department of Fisheries, or something for the crafts. And you're talking about thousands and thousands of the citizens who try to make their living in that area and who try to express their Saint Lucianness in that area. And just before I finish this current ramble, the tourism side of things. So it's a very tricky place, because what we have is we don't have that as a strong and really integral part of our culture. So we run the risk of recreating it, like recreating Laos. When I was at CDF and we first took Laos to Rodney Bay people loved that. You know, the amount of Lucians that came and said, that's the first time I've ever seen Laos. The Laos people hated it. They said, never again, we're not coming to do our Guafet in Rodney Bay. It completely spoiled the community, you know, atmosphere, et cetera, So you run that risk of your culture losing its authenticity, you know, in terms of its community hold, to become a product for tourists, other people to consume, you know, and it's a very tricky balance to find. So if we want to do it right, and we want it to really become something that builds St. Lucian as well as builds good livelihoods, then we have to have a serious program behind it, and serious commitment over the long term, beyond the 5-year election cycle. Let's put it that way. It has to be something that stays beyond, you know. So yeah, there's a lot there. Let me stop there.
Thanks, Finola. And I am thinking now that Allison might have a ramble or two to add in. I mean, thoughts, any thoughts, Allison? And just before I sort of get a feel from the audience as well. You're muted, Allison.
I think something Finola said resonated with me in terms of us often valuing outsiders and outside white more than ourselves. So we do it to ourselves. They do it to us and we do it to ourselves. And I'll give it, as a consultant, I know that when
Allison, can you take a pause for a moment? Can you just adjust your screen a tad so that we have more of you? There we go. Boom. Yeah.
Better?
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. As you know, when international consultants bring on local people to bring local value to the work that they come here to do, they pay us less, you know, because we're not international. Although, you know, when you look at it, we could do the work and we could do it better because we understand the national context. But our own people, we do it to ourselves as well, because, you know, and you see it all the time with developers, you know, the fly-by-nights who can come in and convince governments to, you know, give them land and give them money, and they really have nothing to show for it, but then other than how they look, you know, and our people fall for it. So, and it comes back to this whole thing of valuing self-esteem, identity, you know, understanding our own worth and what we have to offer, you know, and putting a value on that. I think we do tend to underestimate ourselves and what we are, what we have to offer. So that's my very short ramble there.
Okay, thanks for that, Allison. And there's concurrence from my end as well. I have found that in my approach to tourism, which is where my business runs, I have always worked to deliver a product that is uniquely Kirk. And very often folks will say to me, you know, like, locally, how did you think of that? And I just generally invite people, just think, just be different, just do something different, and absolutely put your stamp all over it in a way that's uniquely you. And even as you speak to government support, might it be that government is not aware? So hopefully when government hears some of this, now there can be an awakening. Because point that Finola made, which is so valid, we have so moved behind the times because the world is moving at warp speed while we are still crawling along at a snail's pace. So the gap is just absolutely widening, and that is exacerbating the problem. So I think that value to what is unfolding just as this series is continuing is for us to gain that greater awareness of self, of who we are, and what the possibilities are, because that will help us at so many levels. Gainful employment, self-worth, impact on crime. I mean, all of those things, because just imagine now, someone who now is creating craft and adding value to that craft, branding it in a particular way, because there's some training on branding, being able to offer it through an online platform, let's just say, so that folks are aware of it. Telling the story, because stories sell. Suddenly now, that person or those crafters just might have relatives who have felt that crime is the only way to go. But suddenly those will be businesses that will be protected, because here are the same people who have got a familial link going, oh, she's doing good or he's doing good. You know what? I must safeguard them. I must protect them. So I think that at that deeper level, these are some of the things that we could be served well thinking about. And what I would like to do as well is just invite folks, post something in the Q&A. You know, I'd really love to hear some thoughts. So I'm going to wait and see what comes up. And while we wait for that, I am going to just pull an email that Jordan sent me. Jordan did indicate that he was going to share some stuff that he was happy for me to share on the call, on this webinar. And I also want to say hello to Annette. You know, I spoke about the fact that Mark had done up the kitchen for Annette, and we understand that she would have been into the Jubilee. So I was absolutely delighted when I got a message from Mark saying, no, mom is here with me. And again, so greetings, Annette. And again, just coming back to this point of the sweet spot, the sweet space that Saint Lucia and Saint Lucianness and Lucians hold in the hearts of so many people. And I mean, Mark and Annette are British, you know, but absolutely consider Saint Lucia home. And for folks who may not remember, Mark's dad came to Saint Lucia quite a while back when Saint Lucia, as a surveyor, when Saint Lucia was developing the land registration and titling project. And his dad was the surveyor behind the work. His dad trained a number of surveyors on the island. And these are surveyors who will tell you that, oh my God, this gentleman was a boss surveyor. Much of where they are today, they owe to him for the foundation in surveying that he instilled in them. Yet still, despite being British, Mark and his mom absolutely embraced Saint Lucia. So I think that whereas a people, we can be cynical about others and others of different skin hues. If we were to just put the cynicism aside for a moment and look at what could be gained of value. So rather than taking a position of, as quite often can happen, especially at the grassroots level of, I don't trust you. You know, someone comes into the community, well, I don't trust you. I don't know what you're here for. What do you want? Rather than taking that approach, which is a negative approach, which is an approach of scarcity rather than of abundance, what if one were to take the approach of, what might I learn from you? Because the truth is, if you're closed-minded, then you're not open to receiving anything. be it a value or be it not a value. But I take it that all of us out there are intelligent enough to understand and appreciate when something is a value and when something is not. So the truth is, if we are open-minded, if we see life in terms of abundance, then we have the ability to gain from whatever the interaction is. And I'm not for a moment saying to not have one's eyes open. Absolutely, have a measure of skepticism, but don't be closed-minded, because being closed-minded doesn't serve us. Finola, I'm noticing that you really want to make a point in there. So all yours.
So it's about that issue of trust and valuing. So there are a few things that happen, I think, especially when it comes to cultural development projects or activities. And I can speak from working with the Choiseul crafters and then also working with other community groups, developing products and that, because it's to do with culture, craft, whichever way you look at it. It's always a very short intervention, and yet we have those high ideals the same way that you expressed them earlier. This will lead to gainful employment, people being able to step away or step into a better life and that. And the hard reality is that in most cases it doesn't, because we haven't got that background incubating support to bring people from doing something as a creative pursuit to being successful entrepreneurs, whether it's individually or in a cooperative sort of sense. And so, that's a frustrating thing. And what happens then is you find that a lack of trust builds. So even I've experienced a case where, you say to the Choiseul crafters, oh, we come in and do a project down by you. And, we just did a couple of them. Their reaction is often like, another project? What are you all going to do? You have to tell us what exactly you're going to do, because they're not going to come out because it costs them rather than benefits them. And they set aside their gainful, production to come and learn something. In some cases, they actually end up teaching the person who came more than they learned from the person. That happened recently. That they at least they perceived that to be the case, and that's an unhealthy situation. But in the last 2 times that I worked in Choiseul, it also really hit me that I thought I knew how, screw pine baskets were made from start to finish. I thought I knew how a clay pot, coal pot was made from start to finish. And I learned new things again, including that, the potters would sing a song to call the wind if it wasn't windy enough for the firing on the day. And, my friend Patricia Fay, who's written a book called Creole Clay, I'm like, Trisha, you knew about this song? And one of the ladies sang it for us. And so I sent her the little rendition. She knew nothing about it. And it struck me that the reason that it's like pulling teeth, getting to understand all that goes into these things, is because people themselves don't value that as something to be celebrated. People from outside can come in and say, oh, it's so wonderful. Look at the crafts, the this, the that. And you occasionally do hear it spoken in Saint Lucia, our wonderful traditional crafts and that. But what does it boil down to, really? We don't value them. They're not taught in schools. I did a master's not too long ago in World Heritage and Cultural Projects for Development. And I wrote it again about Choiseul, and I shared it to everybody of all political spectrums. If I could find a contact, I sent my thesis and I said, use it however you want. I don't care, just please use whatever you want from it. Because it was talking about that and talking about doing something that would be a longer term, build for it. And I see a long comment there that I want to read and see what the person is saying. But I just wanted to say, you know, those observations that I had made in recent times, and also to just quickly say that for all my complaining, you know, I look at some of the younger people and I look at what they're doing with the benefit of the technology that's available to us now. And it really is quite different. I also often say to people when they say, oh, we're losing all our culture now. When we were growing up, where could you buy cocoa tea and bakes? You know, it's a rare time you would actually be able to just go and buy that somewhere. Now, that's part of our culture. All our local foods and that are available all over the place at every cabaret and corner, you know, roadside cafe and in, you know, high-end restaurants, you know, to some extent as well. So there is balance, you know, and we have to celebrate the gains that we've made in order to help pull the rest up behind us. And I'll stop there.
Thanks, Finola.
Mm.
I'm just going to read through. Allison, were you wanting to make a comment?
I was just going to make the point that I think our education, I think they recognize it, but so far we've really focused on the academic. So we don't, well, there are two things. We don't do enough in terms of teaching people about local history. And it's something that we've been pushing for from the National Trust perspective. And we have a coalition of heritage organizations, and together we've been really advocating for that with the Ministry of Education. And you would have heard in like the current government is talking along those lines. So hopefully we will see that materialize and Saint Lucian history will be taught in schools. And again, it speaks to the whole thing of building this sense and appreciation of our own identity. But beyond that, it's, you know, it's important to provide children with a diversity of skills. With the TVET coming in, I think that we're broadening, you know, the offering that we have for kids, but we never, children are not taught to be creative, to think outside the box, to be innovative, to be entrepreneurs. Our children are being churned out to go into jobs, you know, the 9 to 5 where, you know, somebody else is taking all the risks. So I think our education system has to look more deliberately at how it can encourage that type of entrepreneurship and support it, as Finola says, with the type of incubator programs. It supports people in the developing the businesses that they want to pursue. A school like CARE, you know, I hear CARE is like a second chance school, which I expect most people know. And I understand that employers love CARE employees because, you know, they have the right attitude coming into the job and they're coming in with skills. But a lot of people look down on what CARE offers, you know, because it's, you know, these are children, these are the throwaway children, but in fact, they come into the workforce and they excel. So I think we really have to look at ensuring that our education system is able to meet the needs of such a diverse population and you know, the skills that they have.
Okay, thanks for that, Allison. And I noticed that we are really getting into it now. This is going beyond rambling and now into beautifully introspective and perspective positions. I just want to share a couple of comments that are coming through. Coming from Joanne, folks will probably remember Joanne from the last webinar that we had. I applaud the ladies' authenticity, transparency, and honesty in relaying their experiences as white/gray Saint Lucians. Allison, looks like you have a term that's trending now. To move forward as a healthy nation, we must acknowledge truths. Kudos to the panel. So thanks for that, Joanne. And I think that these are really deep insights coming from Joanne in her capacity as a lover of history, in fact, a historian, and now in more recent times as a cultural anthropologist who has been looking specifically and in somewhat some detail at Saint Lucia. We also have a comment coming in from Alcina Nole. Alcina, good to have you on. Always happy to have you on, and you have been making it your duty to join in on these. So really, really happy for that and your insights. Government has heard this all before. Foreign consultants have come here and emphasized how important culture is to tourism. That was the purpose behind La Place Carénage, to be a conduit for cultural exchange between visitors and Saint Lucians. But government has no knowledge nor respect for creatives and their products. They don't realize that visitors value cultural exchanges. Our islands recognize the important role arts and crafts play in tourism and values it enough to have government departments to speak to the sector. They benefit along with the creatives monetarily. We have 2 Nobel laureates. We should realize that the potential for other persons to excel is very possible. They are letting the opportunity go to waste. Nellie asked the question, are these cultural anecdotes of the Potter's song recorded musically annotated on sheet music and archived for posterity? So again, just food for thought, and I'm really, really loving what is coming out here. I know the struggle, yeah, Nelly C, not yet. There have been proposals. Okay, I think that this is Finola sharing, and when she was at CDF, we did put together a project to record music and craft that could have done so, but it didn't go through, it didn't get through. Alcina is sharing that I am an educator. As Allison pointed out, the arts are left out of the curriculum, especially visual art, drama, and literature gets attention, but not visual artists. So just some comments that are coming in. Thanks for all of that. And at another level, coming out of another one in the Q&A, I think I saw some stuff coming in. Mark shared, one important thing for people who have craft skills is to ensure that their confidence is built up. I know that from here in France, that many people don't have confidence with what they can do. So again, just a lot of substance coming out from this discussion. And once again, I mean, ladies, hats off to you, just like Joanne has shared, for really, really speaking from the heart. And I am truly appreciative, as we are realizing that the audience is as well, because all so often, you know that common refrain in Saint Lucia, do say I say, or, and we must never forget the or that comes into it. But the truth is, for us to move ahead, for us to grow, we really must take ownership of the things that concern us. So I'm hopeful that this engagement and this sharing that we are having can help to be a catalyst that really makes us realize the value and the importance of our thoughts and sharing. So with that said, I'm going to pause and just find out, Allison, Finola, any other thoughts that you want to add in, you want to share? Anyone? Finola, if you're saying something, you're muted.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, on a positive note as well, I mean, you know, we all know growing up speaking patois, as it was called back then, and Creole now, you know, it was really looked down upon, and it's, you know, it's one of the things that I see as a good renaissance for Saint Lucian culture, that now it is really so much more widely accepted and respected and chosen as a language, you know, to the point that we now actually have, you know, 1 or 2 people who are fairly regularly providing classes and that, and I know, you know, we spoke about teaching history in school, and there's Creole as well on the agenda now. And these are the kind of things that I think, you know, make a huge difference to making our culture an official part of who we are. So I was just scrolling through my phone trying to find the the recording of the song for the Calling the Wind for the artisans. So I'm gonna go back and keep seeing if I can find it, because if I can, I'd like to play it, you know, in the time that we're here. So yeah.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Finola. Allison, any thoughts, any comments? Okay, you're muted, Allison, if you're saying anything. Okay, there you go.
No, I was saying, no, I'm not, I can't think of anything right now.
Okay, I want to share some thoughts. Coming back to the point, I think Finola was making the point about going into communities and working with them, and sometimes the communities sharing stuff that we who are going into the communities aren't even aware of, and also the cost to persons who we're trying to engage. I have had the same experience. I mean, for quite also speaking to the limited amount of time that one has to spend with a community when there's a project. And I have been working with the community of Fongelib for quite some time now. In fact, I look back and I think it might be as much as 7 years that I've been going down there. And I was blown away the first time that I went down, and I just went, oh my God, boy, this is, and you know, I'm going to be unabashed about it. This is a license to print money. And these folks aren't scratching the surface of what is possible. And as I started to work with the community, and the whole idea has been to help the community really gain more value out of this national treasure. And it was the questions of why you coming here, what you want, why you don't go back to Castries. I mean, it was now I never had a problem with it, because I just looked at it that here you are coming into a place, people are going to wonder, what do you want? What's your agenda? And over time, I would either prove myself, or I would be seen as fake, as whatever the case may be. But I also came to realize, and Sylvester Choiseul, who worked very closely with me in helping me develop some of these and putting things forward and was consultant on the project, he said, you know, Kirk, when we did the heritage tourism, what he realizes, again, coming back to the point that you made, Finola, is that we didn't spend enough time. More hand-holding was required. And this is one of the things that I have found. It's so easy for us to just take it for granted that people will get it. But the ideas that we're putting forward are so alien, and in so many instances, people have existed within a dependency syndrome. So here you are asking them to take charge, take control. And in a lot of instances, they may be bashful to share with you that they don't know how. But it really is for us to recognize it. And also, and Allison, you made the point about government. This administration has clearly spoken to wanting to see greater economic benefits redound to communities. And I am seeing that not only is government talking the talk, but government is seeking to walk the walk. And I'm saying seeking to walk because the truth is, and it's important for us to recognize these things, government cannot do it. Government can only be the facilitator. But the truth is now, government can empower communities, government can empower people from within to help to make it happen. And let us create that program that is not going to be just for 3 months or 6 months or whatever, but really committing to making it work. And also, we need to pull out some winners. So I can speak to Fonjalib, where there is this amazing experience at a place called Apoye Park that is stepping up, that has become a winner, that is now creating employment for persons from within the community and beyond. How do we nurture this? How do we take it forward? How do we multiply it within the community? And I got the sense that Allison wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the point of the real value in engaging with community when you're designing projects. You know, as technical people, we think we know it all. I'm not speaking for myself personally, but generally that is our approach. And it always strikes me when because the type I work with requires me to talk to people, a lot of people. And when somebody with a different perspective comes in and you know, and expresses, you know, how they see this thing, what their issues are and how it can work for them, they always, without fail, bring forward aspects that you work into your design to make your project better and make it work better for them. So it's so important to consult. And at the same time, you have to be careful not to build unrealistic expectations among communities when you consult with them. And as Finola says, you get that consultation fatigue, you know, where they're like, oh gosh, you're here again, another project. I mean, recently I was trying to speak to stakeholders. Now, it wasn't at a community level, but I called this guy because his name is on a list as a stakeholder, you know, with a lot to say. And I called him and I said, look, this is what I'm doing. And I tell you, the man started to ask me questions about who I am and how, you know, and at the end of the conversation, he's like, you know what? I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to meet with you. And the only way I'm going to talk to you is if you pay me. You know, so, you know, you have to strike that balance. And because, you know, he says, you know, people have been talking to me for years about the same thing and nothing changes. Yeah. So, yeah.
Allison, I have gotten that as well. And sometimes, like I said, I mean, Fonjalib has become very, very dear at heart to me. And one of the things that happened, I actually came up with this idea that I call caring entrepreneurship. And I actually did a presentation a couple of years ago when the UN, through GEF, the Global Environmental Facility, had the People's Parliament, and there was that fair, what did they call the fair? But I did a presentation at what they call a technical talk, and the idea of caring entrepreneurship. And my thoughts was that from my vantage point, for community tourism to really achieve some of its fullest potential, it requires what I refer to as a caring entrepreneur. Someone who is going to go in, who has, you know, some sort of business insights into tourism understanding, who will work with the community, allow the community to recognize that we need to run a business. And if I am going to be involved, I need to get a remuneration from it, but there's no climbing on your backs. We are going to do this together. There's going to be transparency. You are directly involved. And the idea is helping you to develop so that you can take it over. So it's things like having persons come with me to SLHTA meetings, come with me when I'm going to meetings to meet with officials and so on, so that and voice your concerns, your opinions. Don't be afraid to talk. I will always give you the floor. And then also developing products and allowing them to be creators. So I've got a lady who does breakfast. And so the visitors come in and have breakfast in the community. But I also include that the guides and everyone who's involved will have breakfast with the visitor. Now the visitors pay for it, but here is this lady earning money in addition to what she will be paid as her being involved in the business.
Yeah.
So it's stuff like that. And those who are involved just go. I mean, sometimes the guests don't even have sufficient money to offer tips. So they will say to me, Kirk, you know what, when I go back home, I'm going to send you the money for the tip. And I'm talking about people getting 100, 150 US, 200 US as tips. And they always go, oh my God, Kirk, all of that money, but I didn't do anything. And I go, no, when you share your lived experience, how you were going and bathe in the river with blue soap, and you would bathe so much that your skin would be white, you know, while your mothers were washing the clothes and whatnot. The visitors are blown away by these experiences and actually feel honored that the community shared with them. But generally, the community would have felt, oh my God, I can't tell them these things.
Yeah. So, but what strikes me is that, you know, we don't want to impose on what the experience is, or try to shape it, except to make sure that it meets certain fundamental standards. So there might be health and safety issues, and, you know, so that's the kind of advice you want to give people. And I think too, you know, for small people, marketing is a big challenge for them. So if you can provide them with platforms where they can, you know, they get that visibility, then I think you're really helping. So that it's a question of figuring out what is the best way to encourage these types of products to meet the requisite standards and to excel and to be recognized and then patronized.
And Allison, and you know, there are different ways to approach it, and I'm happy that we are having the conversation and hope that the conversation goes beyond, because we can borrow from what is already working within the society. What are examples? And all we need to do is just go on TripAdvisor and see what experiences are most resonating with visitors. And if one does that, you would be amazed to discover that in any category, the top 5 experiences that absolutely resonate with visitors generally are experiences that are not listed anywhere in St. Lucia's official tourism product. You know, so there is so much available to us. And sometimes it's just working with the communities to empower them, to give them a sense that they can do it too. Yeah. I was just looking at some more stuff that was coming in terms of comments. Flora is asking, and Flora is out of New York, if I remember correctly, if government will not help, can creatives reach out to private entities?
Finola.
Finola, yes. And then I will have some thoughts as well.
I'll let you come back in on that, Kirk, because I know we have slightly different experiences as well. So, I mean, Alison just touched on it as well. The challenge with a lot of creatives is that it takes all of your time and effort to create. It's the same with crafts as it is for, let's say, jewelry, fashion, etc., to an extent. And you know, we always move towards the business side of things, and that's a necessity. And St. Lucia is no different to the rest of the world in that sense, on the base of it. But we need to have a space where it's okay for people to create one-offs of things and high value things that take a lot of time. And so, you know, that whole challenge of doing the business of living a creative life and earning from it is a very real challenge. And again, I'll say it's not, you know, it's not unique to St. Lucia, but St. Lucia is even more challenging in that you know, the price of all of your inputs, especially if you're an artisan and a craftsperson, is getting those inputs, whether it's in the time you take to try and find something because you're going to 6 different hardware stores, you know, to find one thing, and you end up finding, okay, nothing is there, so you go online and you look for it now, and that's a blessing that you can do that, but it's still a challenge to get it in, and then you have to pay all the duties, etc. And even accessing fiscal incentives that exist for businesses. For an artisan, for a craftsperson, I mean, it's been accepted for a while now that it's a serious challenge to even fill out the form, because they ask you to list all the things that you're going to need to import and value it, etc. And by the very nature of that, that activity, that's going to change from 6 months to the next. There will be some cases where you will use the same things over and over again. But in most cases, people are doing as they have to, creating something new, you know, coming up with a new design, using new materials. And so your list could be 500 different items that you'll use small amounts of. And so it becomes completely impractical to have things like fiscal incentives under the way that they're being done now. And we've been having this conversation since forever, 20 something years. And, you know, we keep getting a little closer and then we fall back, and a little closer and we fall back. A secure system coming in didn't make it any easier, because when I lived in Barbados for a while, it was very simple. You registered with customs with a letter from the BIDC saying, yes, you are an artisan, and then you got your concessions. Customs came up to see that you are actually doing what you do, and you got a letter 2 weeks later from the customs controller, and every time you imported something, you just let the importer know, and you got your goods duty free. And, you know, okay, so times change, you know, but Saint Lucia never even reached that point. And so it makes that challenge of making even more difficult. And Kirk touched on it, I know, when we were chatting before. I'm not sure if you did in the live broadcast, but that whole thing of telling the story, well, you have in other ways, but it's the same for the artisans. And very often it's that story that people think is not important. It's like that how I used to live before I became, you know, a more sort of established, or, you know, for want of a better term, a higher level, you know, person in society. And it's like, you know, we have to get over that shame of our, you know, the way things, you know, the way we grew up, you know, our story of how we've come to be where we are, because it's that will, you know, really not only anchor us as people, but anchor us in the bank as well.
Absolutely, Finola. I have found that in having genuine engagement with visitors, it can be surprising discovering their stories. I can think of a client that we had, a family that came in and really uber wealthy, because the dad, I discovered it took him 20 years, but he created a program that allows banks to move money effortlessly. So needless to say, he has come into a lot of money. But I remember taking him, we took the family out for some local fare, and he said that was absolutely what he wanted, because he remembered the days when he lived in Thailand, where they didn't have money and they ate street food. You know, so again, we have this preconceived notion in a lot of instances, just like you're saying, of not sharing the things that we think shouldn't be shared. But really, I think that it's so important for us to always remember that cut any one of us, we're gonna say ouch, and the blood will be red, you know, and it could take your blood to save my life or mine to save yours. So again, and I'm bringing it all back around to I am Lucian. What makes us Lucian? What's the essence of being Lucian? Have we ever looked into it? And how by identifying it, it can help us to be the best that we can be. So I'm finding that these discussions that we are having are really speaking to that today. And I just want to share this comment that came in from Andrew. So Andrew, thanks for that. And it's speaking along the lines of what we're saying here, where he says, thank you, Allison and Finola, for your insights. You have hit on an excellent point about education and how the mindset needs to change for things to improve. But what real solutions might be put in place to address this is in the area of arts and craft, culture, for instance, so that we are not here in the same place in 20 or 30 years' time. For example, where help is not forthcoming from the government, what might be done through the private sector? And I think I also saw this was a similar comment like what came in from Flora a moment ago. If government will not help, can creatives reach out to private entities? Let me open to Allison and Finola for thoughts on that, and I will also share some of my thoughts as well. So any one of you on it, ladies? Allison, I think, Allison, you're on mute. I'm seeing you very animated, but you're muted.
No, I'm laughing. I said Finola should take that one, not me. I mean, to me, I think creators need to organize better among themselves. They, set up cooperatives, and probably they do that already. As I say, Finola would know better than me. But we are notoriously bad at cooperating and collaborating, and we don't appreciate the value that working collaboratively brings.
But so we had a cooperative. We had the Saint Lucia Arts and Crafts Cooperative, and we were one of the first tenants in La Place Carénage. And we did really well until some of our members seemed to have squirreled away some of the money, and at the same time, ended up getting us in problems with our landlords. And basically, we have the distinct history of being the first cooperative to disband in Saint Lucia. We begged, and sorry for Cooperative Department for saying this, but I think they understand that. We begged for assistance in our administration and bookkeeping and that. And, ironically, they felt that there were so many people in there who they thought of highly, myself, Alcina, others, Sabi, etc., that they figured we didn't really need the help, But as I mentioned before, your business takes up so much for so little return when you're doing, especially when you're doing small crafts and that. And it was one of the things that I always found a challenge when I was creating and making. You talk about the bread and butter things, but getting that bread and butter item that you really can make quickly and that will sell in high enough quantities to ease your time and your stress, in order for you to make that move to the next level is almost impossible. And the larger countries like the UK, I mean, Barbados also had it, but most places, EU, Canada, US, they all have very serious incubation support for micro businesses of all kind, and in particular for creatives. So, it might be that there's studio space that's provided, for a period of time. And projects like that have come and gone here. There was a proposal once, I think the French were going to fund it, but at that time they wanted to put us kind of where NSDC is. And it just, the cost of creating it, the rents and to make it a tourism, place for people to come through, the rents they wanted to charge were not high, but for the average artisan were impossible. So there's been a lot of that kind of mismatch, and I have to say, despite the fact that we have been over this many times, and Kirk, you touched on it earlier, you know, has government really, do they know, do they understand? Yes, they do. They understand in detail. There've been countless presentations from the international IFC, is it, from the World Bank, through, you know, we've sat with them. There've been studies done in other Caribbean islands for the value of creative industries and all sorts of different, you know, areas. And so the knowledge is there. We have this lack of belief. And I'll say again, I just want to say I found the song, so if anybody wants to listen to it, but I'll also say, you know, one of the things that I speak about when we do crafts training, and the most recent one was a quite good project by the Sandals Foundation, that was tied directly into selling in sandal shops. But the age-old thing came up, you know, the artisans, they like to get too much for their product, and they're going to have to do something about their prices. It has to be more realistic. And I'm like, okay, here we go again. So the reality is that our situation is that our cost of living is high and our cost of inputs is high here in Saint Lucia. We are not Jamaica, we're not Dominican Republic, we're not Mexico, we're not China. So we have to start from there. We can't pretend that doesn't exist. And then second, in my experience, so when I came back from Barbados, I was making jewelry that was made with porcelain and pure silver and gemstones. And I was selling them in Barbados for, you know, $200 US a piece, $250 US a piece. When I brought them back here and I tried to sell them for that in EC, I couldn't sell them. And then I got them taken to Jade Mountain, where there's no reason why people come to Jade Mountain, cannot afford that, and another customer buying things like that, you know, without even blinking. But they weren't selling. And you know, when I extrapolated experiences at that time also with sandals, we would find that our products were put behind others physically in some cases, and in other cases, if we did, you know, the secret shopper thing, nobody in the shop knew how to sell them, even if we provided story in that. They themselves had so little faith in the Saint Lucian product of an artisan that they just couldn't sell it because they didn't trust that it was actually a product of value and a good quality product. So that sort of training and development has to happen as well, where we work with the managers and the people working in the stores, because it still exists at both levels, and help them to understand why our product, you know, should cost more. Why you can, you know, a sweetgrass basket in the US, a little thing like that size, made from vetiver grass, the same grass we have here, the same technique, sells for $40-something US without a problem. Why? Because it has the story behind it, and that story has been supported. It's you know, authorities have made it, you know, accepted. And so that's, you know, that's really a big issue that we have to get past here still, going forward. Anyway, would y'all like to listen to the song? Can I play it?
Please do, Finola.
I hope you can hear it. And it's Clara Edwards. I hope she doesn't mind me singing. So, okay, let's go. Come on, play. Thank you. Here you go.
Well, my grandmother was doing it, and when I asked her as a child, she told me it is blow, wind, blow. But they would say, lele, kao, lele, lele, kao, lele. Lele, kao, lele, lele, kao, lele. And after 5 times, they wait a little while and the wind begins to blow. So they call the wind. I don't know, that's their myth. I don't know if this is true, but that's their myth. So I went by that.
Wow.
Like that.
Wow. Now what's coming to mind is, oh my God, the things that we could do to monetize that experience and that story. And I mean, I can just think of creating a little competition and asking the tourists to sing the song. You know, I mean, just the things that engage and make it a fun activity. Okay, time is fast flying upon us. I want to just take in a couple of comments other comments that have come in. This is coming from Jordan Gretsch. Going back to what the ladies mentioned earlier about racism, and being mixed race, in my experience with Lucians and some other Afro-Caribbeans, I've always been considered Afro-Caribbean, even though I'm mixed race. Many Lucians, mixed race. Many Lucians I've met say to me in Saint Lucia, because there is Chabin and Dijene, what's that? I don't know, in Saint Lucia. And all Lucians, like most Black Caribbeans, are mixed. So to them, I'm just seen as one of them, despite my white heritage, which I'm interesting though, because it's not saying I'm not part white, but saying I'm both at the same time, if that makes sense. And I feel Afro-Caribbeans are more comfortable with people being mixed, whereas many Europeans still don't seem to be fully comfortable with people of mixed African and European ancestry. So just sharing that. And Allison, I want to say hats off to you, because you did indicate that you shared with family about today's session. And I saw a note a moment ago from Stephen, which I would like to share. Let me just see if I can find it. I think I had it a moment ago.
He
It's
says,
in
you
the
want me to read
comments,
it?
sir.
Okay, there you go.
You found it?
No, I can't seem to find it. You have it?
It says, I remember M&C Fine Arts Awards as an initiative to promote creatives. I see no more of that type of engagement. It is time to revisit these types of engagements and, of course, expand the private sector engagement in the development of the creative industry. Yeah, that was the comment.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. And thanks, Stephen, for that. I also want to just as we look to wrap up, I wanted to just share, this was an email that Jordan James shared with me. And he said, so in terms of my, he has apparently done some DNA research, and he wanted to share, so in terms of my family members from Saint Lucia that have taken DNA testing, we find that the strongest region we have got is Nigeria. And many of us have got Igbo as a specific tribe, and Nigerian is the strongest percentage that all members of my family have received. The next two are Ghana/Liberia/Sierra Leone, but no specific tribes have appeared for us. And next is Congo and Angola, which receive Mbundu and Congo peoples as specific tribes. European ancestry is strongest in French and German, Spanish and Portuguese, and then British and Irish. And that's rather interesting, since we generally think of ourselves as 7 times English and 7 times French. Well, you know, it has been said that French is the language of love or whatever, so maybe no surprise that French is coming up top of the charts there. But I just think the Spanish and Portuguese and German is surprising. Jordan shares that these are from 23andMe. And he also goes on to state that Igbo, Nigerian, and Congo are the most common, with French and Spanish. These are the most common ancestries in my full-blooded Saint Lucian relatives who all parents and grandparents are born in and raised in Saint Lucia. He goes on to say some questions. Do Saint Lucians feel Creole is important to their identity? Because although English is the colonial language, so is French, which Creole gets the vast majority of its lexicon from. How do Lucians feel about this? In regards to the African/Blackness, how do Lucians and African Caribbeans in general perceive Blackness? And who is Black to them? And when does someone in their mind should no longer be considered Black or African, as the one-drop rule would seem inappropriate for someone who looks fully European and has no visible recent African ancestry, to the point someone would assume they're the same as an average Swede, for example. How do Lucians feel when they speak Creole instead of English? Do they ever feel like they're able to express their emotions and inner feelings easier in Creole? Does one language feel more innate to them? If so, how? And why do they think so? Kind regards, Jordan. So some food for thought there. And I think we are now on the 90-minute mark, so I'm going to look for us to wrap this up. But once again, a very deep and insightful session. Ladies, I really, really want to thank you so much for your warm-hearted and from the heart sharing. And what I hope is that it has really, really helped to give insights across the board and also help to encourage others to think of who we really are, who we might become, how might we be able to do better by interacting more with each other, getting a greater sense of who we all are, both individually as well as a collective, And just in wrapping up, I started out with inviting Allison in first, so I'm going to throw it the other way and invite Finola just to share some closing remarks, and then I'll hand it over to you, Allison, for your closing remarks as well. So all yours, Finola.
Thanks, Kirk. Yeah, it's been a pleasure, and there's a lot to discuss. You know, I think it still remains one of the things that is we should truly be proud of in Saint Lucia is our ability to see people beyond their skin color. You know, we feel like we're losing it sometimes, and you know, it is changing. There's no doubt about that, and we are influenced by, you know, the horrible kind of extremism that we're seeing around the world. But I think that's something we really need to hold on to here. And I think, you know, if we explore our culture and even do things like those DNA tests, you know, I think it would be interesting, you know, for us to see the melting pot. Somebody mentioned that, you know, how we're considered a melting pot. You know, we were talking about Indigenous peoples' rights in recent times in a number of different spaces. And I thought, you know, we need to do that DNA project to see how much Amerindian blood is still in Saint Lucia. Is it Kalinago? You know, is it? Hey, look, the other one gone out of my head. But anyway, you know, what's the true story? What other bits and pieces we still have with us? So, yep. So everybody, next present you buy for somebody or whatever, please buy from a local creative.
Thanks for that, Finola. And what a great way to end. Again, empowering our economy, our local economy. And, you know, we can follow the time-old adage that charity begins at home. Allison, over to you.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you to those who joined us. Yeah, I think we need to appreciate that everybody just about in Saint Lucia has such a mixed background, but we're all Saint Lucians and we all want the best for Saint Lucia. So we need to work together and advance the agenda together to the benefit of all. So those superficial differences that, as you say, when you scratch the surface, we all bleed red, you know, we need to put aside and work for the betterment of all.
Thanks, Allison. And thank you to everyone who participated today. If I didn't get around to addressing your comments, please forgive me, but once again, we have gone over the time. So until the next time, here's bidding you a wonderful rest of your afternoon, rest of your evening, wherever you might be. And just going back to the adage that the government has adopted for this year, really, it's about devant ensemble, us going forward together and really, really celebrating our people. We are a great and mighty people, and we will be even greater and mightier when we hold hands together and move forward as one. So folks, thank you very much. Do have a great balance of your Sunday. Bye now.